might be my most prolific year at the LA Times in terms of everything that I wrote about, everything that I covered.
I think we know why he's
the awards, proclamation for Congress, I was kicking ass in 2024, and yet I find myself completely uncomfortable. As much as I resisted even just having my name out there first on anything, the reality is I kind of run out of places to hide. I keep next level. There is no next level for me. I've worked at basically every major newspaper, every major television station, and I've worked in all the major cities. The next level is just me. I've built a career looking at the intersection of sports,
NBA gets it right,
culture, because you wanted to check my black card, and politics. I see it as a reflection of this will continue to be an extension of that.
If the money's no good or the location.
To find a comedian who believes that,
Welcome to the LZ Granderson Show. So, welcome to the LZ Granderson Show. I am your host, LZ. Today is June 10th, 2025, and here are the three things that I'm looking forward to today and why. Number one, the Lakers, specifically Rob Pelinka. Listen, hear me out, Rob. I know you got Luka. I know you're trying to hold on and do something with LeBron before he retires. I'm just asking you, please, don't flip Dalton Connect. Not yet. Let's see if he can be special. He just balled out again, and I know it's Summer League, but don't act as if what we saw in Summer League wasn't what we saw in the regular season last year in his first couple of weeks in the league. It was just his inability to play solid defense that kept him off the floor, and certainly wasn't his ability to score. So I'm just asking, begging. I know we need a big man. Shout out to you, DeAndre. I know we need another big man, but listen, Dalton Connect might be special. And the last thing we want to do is turn the Lakers into the Clippers by sending SGA off too soon. You know what I mean? So keep Dalton. Number two on my list, I'm looking at West Hollywood, and this is why. Jules Tice Williams just passed away. And she deserves a proper send-off specifically from this community because of all that she's done to not just keep us edified, but to actually help her keep us alive. When she opened up Catch One, women weren't even allowed to open up a bar. They weren't allowed to serve. Hell, a black woman, period, owning property in Los Angeles was basically unheard of in the 1970s, and yet she did it. And she didn't stop there. When the HIV/AIDS epidemic came through our community, she used her restaurant and her bar to serve people who couldn't get help elsewhere. She continued to grow and serve her community in other ways beyond just specifically the LGBTQ plus community. And just the fact that Madonna felt the bar was so cool that she had a album release party there should probably tell you that Catch One, if you hadn't heard of it, was pretty iconic and pretty important to a lot of people. And the founder just passed away. So West Hollywood, roll out the carpet, send her off properly because she properly deserves it. And number three on the things that I'm looking out for, my conversation with Roy Wood Jr. Here's why. He's the last of the four conversations in which this podcast started with. I jumped off on Juneteenth talking with Lettucey about what it was like to create a piece like Black Woman, that iconic song that she released late last year, as many of us were still grieving the 2024 general election. She went on and had a fantastic performance opening at the Super Bowl, singing Lift Every Voice and Sing. And she's currently on tour right now in Europe. She talked a lot about what it was like trying to craft music for today that really reflects the political and cultural tensions that we're feeling. And she led into other conversations with Ben Watkins, as well as Big Sean, and Roy Wood Jr. is the final conversation in that. It's a 4-part series. If you hadn't heard the other 3, I really encourage you to do so. Roy has a lot of informative things to say in terms of not only how he approached comedy, but just how he approaches consumption of media, particularly news media, which is a really, really important thing to me as a journalist and should be important to you in terms of an American citizen, because there are a lot of people out there who are benefiting from people not knowing what the hell is going on. So with that being said, here's our conversation with Roy Wood Jr. All righty. So, I just want to jump right into it because, we got history. So we don't need to do all the preamble, how much I respect you, blah, 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 blah. I'll take care of that in the introduction.
we go back pre-Daily Show. So
Pre-Daily Show,
2011, 2012, somewhere in there.
when we barely had a black president.
I'll always be thankful to cats like you and George Sedano and Keyshawn Johnson for letting me come up in that studio at ESPN Radio, because that really helped. It helped me figure out my comedic identity. I'll just leave it at
Hmm,
that. I don't get the Daily Show without those 2 or 3 years of relationships I built around ESPN. And
man,
all
man,
it would have
brother.
taken is one person on any show to go, I don't fuck with him. And that would have been it for me across the whole network. You know what I'm saying? So like that, cats like you and Jamel Hill and Max Kellerman back when Sports Nation was popping at
Yes,
ESPN
sir.
LA. Like, oh man, so many people, man. But Money John, I could go on and on, man. But good to see you, brother. Good to see you.
Man, man, that is. Thank you so much, brother, for that. I really do appreciate it. We had you on because you're outstanding, man. I mean, that was it was. I mean, it was easy. It was like going, oh, we need someone
But
talented who knows what they're doing. Oh, bam.
see, Keyshawn Johnson made that show so intimidating because I felt like with Key, every time I came on that morning show, like you and Sedano was cool, but Keyshawn was like, I need you to be funny again. Like that was the look in his eyes. This is
you, you, you know, you know well, the funny thing about Key Man is that beneath all that veneer, right, the exterior, he ain't nothing but a teddy bear.
oh, he's a good dude, but he's like, you were here to do a job. It took me back to like year one morning radio in Birmingham, 2001 out of college, where my first boss told me literally, do not speak unless you have something funny to say. You are fourth chair. Whatever opinion you have has already been covered by the first three chairs. So, like, when I used to get in the studio with y'all, man, and Keith be looking at me during the commercial breaks, I'm like, I'm not being funny enough. This is a wrap for me.
Wait, wait. So I got a question for you.
He
So
finna
you're in
call Bristol.
Birmingham. You're checking off the first three chairs that go. All right, they said that. Okay, chair two said that. Okay, chair three said that. At what point did you realize you had enough time to come in with something fresh, as opposed to, dang it, I missed it?
Well, you know what, man? At its core, that time in morning radio established my comedic writing style
Hmm.
because I had to, as the comedian on that morning show, I had to, what is nobody else going to say about this issue? What is the one thing no one else can say? If I can figure that out, then I get to talk today. So if you look at what my stand-up is now, if you look at what the Daily Show is, we already know both sides of the issue. What's the third or the fourth side? Because I got to say something that Nan three hosts have said, and I can't say anything that the callers might say.
Right, because then you can
So
get me replaced with the caller.
So the advantage I had in morning radio in those days is that I was also the producer of the show. So I kind of had a little bit of say in what the topics would be for the day. So the night before, I would be looking at what I'm going to pitch for the show rundown the next day for
Mm-hmm.
the little morning budget meeting. I already had my jokes in my back pocket. So I started figuring out if I start writing and having points of view the night before, then I'm
Hmm.
coming in with heat and I ain't got to be brainstorming on the fly in the middle of a live break. So it took me about a year to figure that out. But once I did, that's kind of where my like kind of comedic muscle started, being built was 1,000% in morning radio in Birmingham at 95.7.
What was the angles that you sought, if you can remember back then? Did they tend to lean towards more social commentary? Was it more of the obscure or the ridiculous? Can you what's a satire? Like how would you characterize those early days, and especially when you look back on them now and where you are and how you approach comedy today?
I didn't have a lot of political savvy back then, but what I did learn also, god damn man, that radio station taught me so much. You get a lesson in local civics because we were the community state. We were the only local morning show. We had Birmingham is a super competitive urban market, right? And so the reason why we were number one was because we were the most connected to the community. So we had calls on all the time. We had the mayor on. We had pastors on. We had therapists. We had lawyers. We had defense attorneys on who was giving the Black community legal advice. So if there was a tragedy within our community, if there's a tornado or a shooting or a cop dying, we had people on relevant to that issue and we would take calls. So you start understanding the relationship between politicians and the community and how social justice and being aware of that. I mean, Trayvon era, by then I was the host of the show by then. So you understand what your responsibility is to the community. But early on, it was just literally, I need to be nonsensical to get a laugh. And if I can get you to laugh, then you can trust me to be poignant and say something of substance and blah, blah, blah. But, I figured out more often than not, if I could talk about it through like the prank phone calls I was given or the parody songs I was given, how can I talk about this thing in a funny way? One of the biggest prank calls I ever did was this joint called Barber's Check. And it's the first thing that I really did. It's the first thing I ever did that went viral. And back then, going viral meant you went viral over email. And people would, like, hey, it's '03. That's what it was. You would get an email and someone would go, listen to this. And in the email, it's just a list of everybody else who already downloaded.
That's right. We didn't have BCC back then or nothing. It was just names and addresses.
You had everybody's email, and you just raw dogging files straight to your computer. No Norton antivirus. And so the crux of that call, I did that prank call 2 months after Hurricane Katrina, maybe a month after Katrina happened. And what was happening in the South was there were a lot of New Orleanians that were displaced to other southern cities. And, they were going to Houston, a lot came to Birmingham, some went to Memphis, and they were stressing local resources. And not by any fault of their own, it's just the city wasn't set up to put 20,000 people in an auditorium to give them housing, to help them find jobs, to give them, to give them a sense of life again. That was kind of pissing off locals who felt like those resources, you know what I mean? Like there was a bit of a, and it wasn't in disrespect to the evacuees as much as it was to say to the local politicians, hey, that's fucked up. Y'all said y'all didn't have the money. You got the money for them. Okay, cool. So then that means you got money for us to do the thing you said. So it was tense in Birmingham. And I called this lady and I told her we were cutting her Social Security check to help Hurricane Katrina victims. And she went off. It's still on the internet. If you never heard it, it's still on YouTube to this day. And it was funny. And it was a very stress relief type of thing to let her get that off her chest. And because it was so funny, it was never taken, at least not to my knowledge, it was never taken as disrespect towards anybody that got messed up by Katrina. So that's where the social awareness was at that time. But I mean, man, bro, it would be, if that's '03, no, Katrina's '05. If that's '05, it'd be another 10 years before I really became, a little more, as they say, wokety woke with the topics and the selections and stuff.
The transition for yourself over that decade from, Brenda's Check to wokety woke. How would you characterize the education process? How did you come about shaping your political and social commentary identity? Did you rely on mainstream media? Did you quote unquote do your own research? Like, how did you arrive at these talking points? Because some of our brethren, if you will, who operate in this comedic space of yours, they failed in terms of gathering information woefully during 2024, and you didn't. So I'm just curious as to how did you avoid those pitfalls in building your sense of awareness?
When I used to tour, when I was a road comedian, I guess technically I still, but I mean road in the sense of in your car every day, sleeping in your car at truck stops on off days because it's cheaper than driving back home. The thing I used to do when I would go into a city was get a local paper and read their local paper. I read your local news and your sports news, and that usually gives you a pretty good scope of what that town is about and who those people are. So for about 10 years, 45 weeks a year, I was reading somebody's local news. And as newspaper started to fall off and die off, you know, I would like, it's ironic working for CNN now. I didn't watch a lot of CNN during that time. I didn't watch a lot of cable news. I was in motion too much. So all of my news had to come from static places, man. So, you
Hmm.
know, I'd read the local paper, I watch the local news. For the most part, those stories are the same. USA Today, Newsweek, Time. And then because I was younger back in those days, I was still reading Vibe and The Source because I needed to be up on entertainment news a little bit, as best I could. Entertainment Weekly, and this last one's going to throw you off, but I'd also read Guns and Ammo because, but those were the type of places I was playing sometimes.
Right, right.
So I need to know the Jeezy, what's going on with Jeezy, and oh, did you see Phil Mob has a new app? But then I also need to know, hey, Beretta got that new gun. They got them, them Eagle Talon bullets they made in Alabama. That's a Huntsville. So you need to be up on armament and rap music and the news. And so for me, a lot of it was just reading, man. My pops was a radio news journalist. I have two brothers who are also reporters and anchors and assignment desk. So, my dad watched a lot of cable news and C-SPAN, and I just viewed that as very buttoned up. And also in those days, Stuart Scott was my idol because he was very loose with it. I enjoyed Kenny Mayne. Like these are the people that I liked. I had to watch cable news for journalism. For when I was at FAMU, you had to watch the journalism channel, and it's like I don't know. Once I got out of school, I was like anything but that. Where can I get information about what people are doing and going through and experiencing and shit like that? And so you just kind of become a little bit of a I don't know what's it, anthropologist, like a social anthropologist in a way,
I
as
would
a
think
comedian.
so. I would
You
think,
know,
it's funny, you know, listening to you talk about the way that you've sort of built your understanding of the world because, as a journalist, I follow a very similar pattern. You know, people assume that, you are sitting down and just making phone calls or looking everything up on the internet, but you're really just out in these streets. And one of the first things I like to do when get out in these streets is get all the local rags. The
yeah.
publications that are still in print in those places that perhaps we shouldn't mention, but I still show up in. You got those little alternative weeklies you can grab, but that's how you figure out a community. And between reading and hitting the ground, as a journalist, we are anthropologists, social anthropologists,
You know what?
and and that's just kind of like the way that you learn. And if you don't actually go out and touch and feel life, how can you write about it and cover it? And in your case, how can you commentate on it?
The thing that I found most interesting that would tell me a lot about where I was performing was the want ads, the jobs that were being offered to people versus what people were selling. What are you willing to let go? Like just on some poverty versus privilege type stuff. What are you willing to sell? And you know immediately whether you in a spot where folks is down bad or where things are just okay. I mean, you're
Hmm.
already in a certain level of broke if you selling shit in the paper. I've
Right.
done it, so I can vouch. Hey, I got 10 Sega Genesis games. You can have them for $8. Call this. It was a while. This was Craigslist before Craigslist, essentially. But in that space, that was where I used to love reading the Thrifty Nickel. They got one now where it's just mug shots. Like
Right.
it's a very specific part of the South. It might be Midwest too, but I only seen it down south. They got a newspaper at the front counter at the gas station, and it's just mug shots of every motherfucker that's been arrested in that county since the last issue. It's foul as hell. But it also tells a story of the people in a way. It's like it could be murder, it could be stealing a lawnmower. It's just, I don't know, man. I
Well,
get very curious about people and who people are, and so weird
it
shit
almost
like
feels
that.
like they're it almost feels like they're trying to use public shame as a weapon to get people to
Yeah.
stop behaving badly.
Well, I feel like it started as one of those, here's the ones who got popped for prostitution or soliciting a prostitute or something with kids or the kid porn. And then it just expanded into, fuck it, man. He stole a lawnmower. And it's pages of mugshots. And
Anybody you know? You ever stroll and just go, hey, I wonder what happened to so and so, like a yearbook?
No, thankfully. Thankfully. Most of my friends that are in jail, they've been there for a while. So they was in jail long before this magazine
That's
was a
crazy.
thing.
So I've been spending a lot of time, Roy, talking to a lot of Black creatives, in various industries about the question of how do you insert comedy or create in this time right now in America, right? Because let's face it, the shit ain't looking good. So, but what's really fascinating from this conversation with you is that the other people that I spoke to all talked about comedy. But I never hear comedians say, well, it's important that singers do. No, comedians even are aware that it's important that comedians are meeting the moment each time this moment presents itself. And so I guess my question to you is, do you feel like this is a moment to be met? And if so, are Black creatives meeting it?
I think Black creatives are meeting the moment, but you would be hard pressed to find a comedian who believes that their work has that much effect on people in society. If you take that from it, cool. But like the question I throw back to people who have that perspective about comedy and its worth, and now more than ever, if the world was level, and whatever you define as level being, if everything was gravy, I guarantee you the comedian's process would be the same. Like there's no comedian that just said, all right, now I gotta lock in and only talk about this stuff. George Carlin was going at it at a time where a lot of people said, oh man, everything's straight. That was his truth. So I just think that I don't think that the factories that create truth and catharsis for the world, our recipe for creating truth is the same. Our recipe for creating jokes is the same. The demand went up. The need for it went up. So it tastes different. It feels a little bit different when it's something that you really needed versus something that 10 years ago, or let's just say Def Jam era, nobody was saying these things during the Def Jam era about comedy being the escape and to challenge Ronald Reagan and it's Bill Clinton. Clinton is the president. Everything, like those jokes would have been the same jokes. I think that creatives are doing a great job, to me, on the writing side. Like there's great comics, of course, and there's comedians that have done a great job of using their voice to, like what W. Kamau Bell did at CNN with United Shades of America, just
Mhm.
literally treating racism like Anthony Bourdain and going from town. Just let me sample your oppression. That's good oppression. That's a version of what you're talking about. Like that show, even the show he did before that, completely biased, totally biased on FX. That's a show that wouldn't have happened if we weren't in the throes of Trayvon and police reform. I don't think that show gets pitched. It definitely doesn't get greenlit if we're not in that time. So I mean, there's some regard, but I just think it's, to me, resistance humor or educating humor or any of that, to me, that all falls more so in television, because TV is a reflection of who we are, where I feel like movies are what we wish we could be, or who we
Hmm.
were, but TV is very reflective of what's happening now, either with people or the reaction to what the people are saying. It's the same way TV right now, they're canceling a lot of the shows that really focus on serious societal issues because there's a pushback against, those types of topics. And a lot of corporations are scared of losing viewers. So the type of TV that's getting made is reflective of the societal norms that are in place right now. Whereas you had a show with Lamorne Morris, great show on Hulu, I think 5, 6 years ago. The title of the show literally was called Woke.
Mm-hmm.
Greenlit, made, because that was a time and there was a push and that's what was happening. So I think that television has a more direct one-to-one reactionary creative process than a comedian who's just going to do what they want to do when they want to do it. The same way there's escapist comics as well. No one talks shit to them. You're not going to, nobody ever pulls Mike Epps to the side and goes, "Hey man, you should talk more about the issues." It's like, no.
Was shitty?
That
Is I mean,
no. No, he's Mike Epps. This is what I do. And this is what makes me fun. And if this is what you enjoy, pay money, come see it. And if you don't like this, go see Roy, and he might give you a couple gun control jokes. He might mention mental health. And, I think that that's what makes comedy special, because when you start asking artists to specifically address specific issues, I think you're asking them to play at a different BPM. If you want to make a music analogy, it's and we never do that with musicians either. Music make you feel good. Music make you forget about the problem. Same as a joke. Why y'all ain't telling everybody? Like, y'all love Beyonce because Beyonce does that. Okay. Kendrick kind of does it to a degree. Kendrick infuses culture to make you proud of yourself, but Kendrick is not explicitly on a song going, Russia shouldn't invade Ukraine. You
I,
know,
I think he could though. I think if anyone could actually make that shit work, K Dot.
Putin on the invasion. K Dot over there got the drones and they blazing. Yeah, 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 yeah. He'd
See,
he'd figure out something. It's a good
he figured out
freestyle.
something.
I'm 46.
So, if you're feeling as if your perspective is that comedians are going to approach their comedy the same way, regardless of what's happening in society, then why is it that when we talk about the great comics, you mentioned Carlin, Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, obviously, we're talking about the comedians who were the ones who were political. We're not often talking about the ones who are only nonsensical. Well, why is
That's
that?
true. But I think it's because that's relatable, because the issues affect us directly. So anyone talking about something that directly affects us to a degree is hitting a nerve that's going to be more memorable than someone that is doing, as I like to call it, escapist humor. So you can either run towards a problem and laugh at it, or you can run away from it and laugh about anything but the problem. And both versions of that are right. Like I would put Jerry Seinfeld as escapist humor. Like I'm not here to talk about hot buttons. I'm gonna talk about airports and why the cab seat is stinks, whatever, and craft amazing jokes out of it, but then there's also people that can take an issue and make it something where they're trying to dissect it. Chappelle comes to mind. Chappelle wasn't this political when he first started. Go back and watch a lot of those bigger specials he had from way back when. He wasn't nearly as political or divisive um, back then as he is now. And so I think that when people start talking about things that we care about, then somewhere in there it becomes a real issue of that being more memorable because it's the feeling. I think if you take two comedians and you put them side by side and they are both of equal funny ability, capability, whatever, the one that makes you feel something is probably the one that's going to leave you remembering more. If you look at Bernie Mac, right? And if we just
Mhm.
take his Kings of Comedy set, which is really the bigger, I would say his biggest, most memorable. I would argue bigger than the Def Jam because the Kings of Comedy set essentially birthed the sitcom.
Right.
Bernie Mac, that set, Bernie Mac's sitcom is essentially a man dealing with the ripple effects of addiction. It's never explicitly stated because that wasn't Bernie's style. That whole joke about taking care of my sister's kid, she's on drugs, that's literally about helping someone. And the idea of it is, so there's a nobility in that act, number one. So it endears us to him. So it makes you love him more. But he doesn't lean solely into the drug part. I think in Kings of Comedy, he throws it away even. My sister was on drugs. And then the crowd kind of murmurs and go, "Oh, don't boo, everybody got one." And the crowd laughs in approval, in
Right.
agreement.
Right. Because it's
And
real.
then, yes, and then he goes into, "Here's how I'm trying to help her." He didn't have to go off into a tangent about drugs in the community and the only reason the drugs is in there, the CIA, and because that's not his style. So, I just don't think it's fair when we try to dictate to the performers, you need to do what I need to feel. Because what you're doing right now is cool, but it's not deep enough. But then I think it's on the consumer to go find the person who is, because it's somebody for everybody. And we're not all like running towards these problems the same way. Like my special on Hulu, Lonely Flowers, I don't talk about politics at all. I had 20 minutes of Kamala and Joe in there. And by the time it came time to tape the show for Hulu, I was like, I just want to talk about loneliness. I've done 3 specials
Mm.
about politics and race relations and police reform and mass shootings. Like I did it. Didn't cover it all. I just want to talk about loneliness this time. I'm sorry. I know Trump won. I know this deep. I'm sorry. I don't think that problem's going away. And I also have other avenues where I can exude those opinions and thoughts. And I think that's one advantage I might have over a lot of comedians and definitely over a TV writer is that I can decide which avenue to put those things in. I had a podcast for 2 years with Comedy Central. All we did was talk about unemployment. It's the whole podcast was about jobs and how to get a job, and it was birthed from the spike in unemployment during COVID. And so it was just basically employment tips / tell me about your job. Nobody ever messaged me and told me you need to talk about the bombs falling wherever bombs were falling that year. So, it's just like podcasts aren't given that same expectation, but I feel like to a degree, comedians are. So much so that's part of why I don't like doing panel shows that much anymore. But when I was at Daily Show, you get these invites to come on all of these different, I call them argue in the box show. Everybody in a box and they're yelling at each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm exhausted from that too, to be honest with you, my friend.
but the only thing that saves me on Abby Phillip is that most of the people on the panel know me as Joke Dude on CNN now. So there's enough of a reputation to where I'm given a little bit of a leeway to kind of
Mhm.
be silly if I want. But 9 times out of 10, man, you throw a joke on one of these panel shows, it gets crickets because everybody else is serious. You need to be serious. It's not what I do.
It's it's it is an interesting time in terms of trying to figure out the right formula, right? For not just mainstream media or legacy media, like a CNN or in my case, ABC News and the LA Times, but it's about finding the right chemistry, because the content is important for people to consume. But if you don't get the chemistry right, they're never going to get the content. and I, I'm wondering from like your perspective, because now that you're more intimately involved in this news organization beast, if you had a magic wand that could fix one or two issues in terms of what news media needs to do in order to make an impact in American society again in a trusted way, what would be those one or two things that you would change right away that you think would, bam, Americans would now trust news source the way they did like in the 70s after Watergate?
I think the first thing I would do if I had a news organization, I would integrate the perspectives of regular people more into the show. But it's hard to do because regular people aren't media savvy. But to me, that's part of that's what gives them the appeal. You'll have, how can I put it? So there was a conversation we had at the Daily Show 4 years ago, maybe. I don't fucking know, man. It was before Trevor left. Trevor was still there as host in the chair. And we're figuring out these SOT roles, right? And so the SOT role, for the listeners who don't know, that's where the host makes reference to a lot of people are talking about this issue. And then they show 4 or 5 clips of people talking about the issue. And then you make a joke coming out of that role when you're back to the host in the chair. So they're going through the people to put in the SOT role. And I had seen a podcaster talk about the same issue. And it was very funny to me the way the podcaster said something. So this really ain't my department. Just as a correspondent, I'm out of bounds. But in the morning meetings at Daily Show were set up in a way where anybody could pitch. Like that's part of the beauty of the show. So I pitch, if we have this SOT role with these 4 people in the suit from the argument box TV shows, throw the podcaster in too. And it was a long discussion. It's like it extended beyond the meeting about whether or not this podcast clip counts as relevant media. And this is before podcasting is what it is now, in the sense of it being seen as a level of yes. It was still, which are the good podcasts and which ones are people in the basement yelling like Alex Jones. And I to this day, man, I can't remember if we even used the fucking clip in the SOT role. But the idea of whether or not there is legitimacy to this person who has an opinion and said something similar to all of these people in suits. And the only difference between the two of them is camera quality and the clothes they were wearing. So if I'm legacy media, I'm putting more people who look like the viewer on than people who look less like the viewer. And I'm not saying give a whole segment to a dude in a basement, but the idea of, even if there was a way to have I don't know, if you send a report, like man on the street isn't enough. Like
town halls aren't enough, because
town halls are viewed by the streets as manicured performance Q&A 9 times out of 10. And most of those town halls, the people they're picking, the question's been pre-screened, so there's no curveballs. So if I'm a politician, the best thing the Republicans could have done was let them town halls ride when they was getting cussed out about a month into Trump's term, and the jobs were getting fucked up in Trump districts, and then they had to go and explain Trump's bill and the Medicaid cut, and they was getting yelled at. Now that's good TV. And talk to those people, you know what I mean? And I really wish that, I hope that cable news can start better reflecting the people that watch it, because that's one way to regain the trust. We've lost the legitimacy of a suit being the reason that you are trusted now. Lester Holt just stepped down. That was it.
That's the last good suit.
That's the last suit that you could trust. David Muir, I guess, but then they got mad at him because his fire jacket didn't fit right during the forest fire. They're looking for any reason to nitpick. And that's an established journalist who's been in the shit. Like Anderson Cooper too. People respect his suit.
The thing that's so funny is that we've all have done it at some point or another, have found ourselves in some caftan that we're supposed to make work on television. And so you try and, taper a little bit on the fly. But, most people don't know that. And so I understood where the heat was coming from, no pun intended. But it was
But they take that, and then that will immediately be the thing that makes them want to discredit anything else ABC News reports on for the next 6 months, which is stupid. So, I don't know how much. I don't know how much you can fix the problem with only the tools of that people see as the problem. You know what I mean? It's almost like making roster changes. If you want to one-to-one it to sports, you're trying to fix it without making any real roster changes or changes to the format and content and things like that. And I think that's where a lot of these shows, struggle. The issue with podcasting is that podcasting is seen as this one umbrella of media, but under that umbrella, there's a lot of illegitimate, unverified ass information getting tossed around. And I think the thing that makes podcasting difficult, and I think this was the issue that we had at Daily Show at the time with this, was that as a member of the general television news consuming public, are we ready to accept a motherfucker on the couch as legitimate? Or is that just some opinion? News and opinion look very, very similar, sometimes. I used to joke on stage a long time ago that if you're on TV as a pundit, you shouldn't be allowed to wear a suit. Because that's part of where it got cloudy.
What's funny?
Sean Hannity was never news. He came from news, but his rise was opinion. Right. He needed to have on a hoodie. That way I know that you just talking shit. And that's fine. Talk shit, make your money. But the public, we needed the suit. Bryant Gumbel, like, we got the suit on. It's like, all right, I ain't playing. Okay. Listen, shit's bad. Yeah.
I would like to shift gears for a second because you have a book coming out in October.
Yeah, man. Pre-sale now. The Man of Many Fathers. From Crown Publisher. Am I supposed to say that? This is my first book, so I don't know how I'm supposed to play it.
I brought it up because I want you to shoot your shot. What was the process like? Did someone approach you, or have you always had this book in your belly and you finally had an opportunity to get with a publisher and to get it out of you? Like, well, let's talk about this process for yourself.
I had my son, when my son was born, he's 9 now. And I started thinking about all the things I wanted to teach him, this value, that value, etc. And to establish how I'm going to teach that, I had to have a moment of reflection of, well, where did I learn that? And if I know where I learned that, then maybe I could do it the same way. And the more I started looking at so many of the values that I have as a man, I didn't learn a lot of them from my dad. My dad died when I was 16, so I didn't get all the game I was supposed to get from him. I got it from other people. And so the stories of how I kind of came to a lot of those conclusions, and the book, for the most part, it's semi-memoir, but it's more life lessons. Just like I literally say, it's life lessons disguised as a memoir. That's what it is. So, one section, one part of the book might be a story about how to stand up for yourself, especially when you're dealing with a crazy employer that's talking wild to you. And then the next one is, if you got a coworker that snort cocaine, you probably shouldn't snitch on them. These things are both true.
Man. Some
these
things
things,
have to be written down.
and these are lessons for my son to take into manhood. Whether I live another day or not, he's got these lessons in his hand. So, it's a lot about the idea of how it really does take a village to raise someone, and the idea of not staying anywhere with anyone or anything if you're not happy. That was something I always struggled with. And I tell a story about a friend of mine who I saw on a rise and then a fall career wise. And his journey ended with a death by suicide.
Hmm.
So identifying things within other people, and that's one terrible disadvantage to being a comedian, is that you will know innumerable people who will kill themselves or overdose. I'm 27 years into this job. So I'm up there. So I know a lot of them. And so understanding that feeling and how to identify not necessarily suicidal tendencies within yourself, but to at least sit and acknowledge, this does not bring me joy. How can I change it? Is there a way for that? And I had lessons in that. And so, these are a lot of, it's a book filled with a lot of the conversations I wish had been able to have with my father, but I'm thankful that I was able to have them with the men that I was able to, bring some attention to in the book.
That's absolutely beautiful, man. That's fantastic. My son and I, we just had our annual father-son trip. We went to go see K Dot in LA recently, and I was talking with my friends, and they were like, how was it? And da 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 da. And I'm like going, there's just certain memories I just want him to have when I'm gone. And it's like, I want 20 years, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, whenever he hear turn the TV off, that was the song Dad spilled the beer on himself. Like, I want him to have that memory. So I totally am with you, man. It's just like, you start, I don't know, like when you have a son as a man, I just felt the need to like tell him everything over and over and over again, because I didn't want him to get tested. I didn't want him to be a punk. I didn't want to be taken advantage of, but you can't tell them everything all at once. So the book, that just sounds fantastic. You can always go back and revisit that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just things you didn't gather at the time. And then when you get older, you look back in retrospect and you go, oh, wow, that's why I am that particular way. Or that's why I have that sense of hustle or awakening, within myself. But yeah, it was a great experience. It took 2 years to do. So
Favorite
that's,
passage?
ooh, damn, that's a good question, man. Um, damn, I had some excerpts I was trying to pull for something else. I don't say passage, but I guess an observation was in realizing all of these lessons that I got from other people. It's a weird thing when you get to be more of a father to your child than your father was to you.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the hardest thing you have to let go of when you make a choice to be present in your child's life and be there is that you're fighting this battle of being happy to be a father while also being sad for yourself and that you didn't get this and realizing you didn't get it. Like I remember, man, I played catch with my son for the first time. I almost cried in front of him. So I just never did that with my pops. He was gone. He was in the streets. Like, so he was home. It was quick. Hi, bye. All right, I gotta go. Like, so I never got that. And so you're being present as a father while also trying not to be jealous of your kid, but you're the reason you're jealous. So it's your fault.
Is that
you know,
self-hate?
yeah. Yeah.
Why you
It's
father? I hate you.
yeah.
Like
Look at you with your good daddy. I didn't have this. Put the ball down. We're going back inside.
It's astonishing. It's astonishing, but you're so right. I didn't grow up with my father, and when he passed away, I was mourning the fact that I wasn't sufficiently sad because I didn't grow up with him. I wasn't mourning his actual death. And
Yeah.
it took me a while to kind of unpack how I really was feeling about it. And it was like, but at the same time, to your point, also recognizing that my son won't have that same sort of response, that he knew me, he knows me. There will be a connection there. There won't be a mourning of what wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the idea of the more you know who I am, the better you can identify who you are, or who you aren't, even. My dad, you put a lot of pieces together of who your parent is based on what other people tell you. But the truth is that none of those people got the real him. The only people that got something close to that were the women that he had children with, that he spent time with. And I know what my mom did or didn't get. I had a front row seat to that. And the rest of the women I never talked to. So, somebody coming up to me and saying, when your father was on WVON in Chicago, he gave me man, when I did the correspondence dinner, bro, there was so many black journalists who literally just go, I worked for your dad. I
Wow.
interned for your dad.
You had no idea.
And these are behemoths in the industry now. And they're showering me with so many great things about him. And I'm like, that's cool, but it doesn't help me completely. And I think that, but I already knew he was good and professional and helped people. And I do that. So, okay, that's where I got that from. So I understand that. But what about this part of me or that part of me or this part? Like, no one can answer those questions. And I think the biggest thing that I had to make peace with is that you're not always going to have all the answers about your parents. And that's okay. Yeah. You just got to figure out who you are, how you became that way, document it, and put that bitch on Amazon for about $30. Audio book, voiced by minute. And as you and your son figure it out,
monetize that pain.
Put a little bit of money on that pain.
Like a soothing balm. Get some Bitcoin on that and soothe it, rub it down a little bit. It's so wild though, man. To your point, I was trying to figure out, because I've been a professional journalist now for about 30 years. And basically the entire time I've been fighting the system, fighting the man. Like, that's just like my life's work, right? Like, I spend very little time on bullshit. I enjoy bullshit. I can do bullshit. But when I think about the totality of my career, it's basically serious shit, right? And I started doing research on my father because I really wanted to know where this shit came from. Turns out my father sued the city of Detroit in 1972. The reason why that year is important is because that was the year I was born. And so I've come to realize that my father was cussing out the city of Detroit all around me, around my mama. I kept hearing it in her belly. So when I came out, I was ready to fight. Like, I figured that's what happened. He's saying, these motherfuckers can't do this to me. I'm going to show them, blah, 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 blah. And I just heard that for like 9 months while he was getting ready to sue Detroit. And he won, by the way.
I feel like that's how it sounds. Like,
I'm pretty sure that's how it sounded. I made up a story, to fill in the gaps. That's what you got to do, right? To kind of keep it moving forward. Brother, I appreciate your time so much. I really, really do. Thank you, Roy, for not just, what you do on stage, but what you do behind the camera. I know that you just are filled with so much joy and you just help so much positivity in our community and in the industry, man. I remember during COVID, you were helping to raise money, man, for comedians who were displaced. So
myself, John Mulaney, Mike Birbiglia, man, the wait staff of them comedy clubs, man. Yeah, it was getting them right.
Yeah, man. So I like you showed me love in the beginning. I'm letting you know I've always been a fan of yours, both on stage as well as the stuff you do off stage. So thank you so much, and good luck on the rest of the book tour, man.
Okay, done deal, man. Thank you, brother.